Lunchtime Leadership Show, and we are going over Be Obsessed or Be Average by Grant Cardon. We are on chapter 12. We're almost finished with this book. I believe we have one more chapter left after this one.
That's amazing.
And today we are talking about obsessed with persistence. So it has become popular and acceptable for people to just give up and quit on their goals without seeing them through. So some examples of some people who persisted longer, even past the thought of being reasonable. Walt Disney was turned down for financing 302 times. His first animated company went bankrupt. Stephen King's first book, Carrie, was rejected 30 times. He even threw the manuscript in the trash at one point. And then Henry Ford's first 2 car companies failed and left him broke. So these are people that everybody knows. We know them for their successes, but not everybody looks back at what they had to struggle through to actually get there. So people will give you permission to quit with things when things don't work out and say things like, oh, well, you tried. It's okay that it didn't work out. Just be happy with what you have. Be thankful that you have this much. But really, what Grant goes in to say, he's like, really, these people need to be upset that you failed, and because the only time that you fail is when you quit, which brings us to the next part. The super successful don't just overcome their failures, they use them as fuel to persist. So the difference between success and failure is staying in the game when others throw in the towel. So here's a couple ways that you can exercise persistence muscles, as he says. For one, complete every task, finish everything you start, and quit walking away from unfinished projects in your professional and personal life. So how you do anything is how you do everything. So this is something that you really have to look at. If you have a bunch of tools sitting in your garage with half-finished projects, if there's half-finished projects in your home, if there's things on your desk that haven't been touched in a while, like, those are things that you need to look at. You have to look at, am I following through with the things that I say I'm going to do? Number 2, when you hit the wall, don't focus on the obstacle. Look at creative ways to take another run at it. Also, this is where it helps to be around other people who are also striving for success and the same goal as you are, because when you're around all these different people, you also get other creative ideas. Or when you talk about it with somebody, I'm like, hey, I'm struggling with this. Is there another way? Maybe I'm not seeing it. Is there another way to go about this? You don't want to ask your friends who are not in business. They don't know. They could try to give you advice, but it's not the best advice. So you have to watch who you're asking. Number 3, expect others to quit while persistence begins and ends with you. Be prepared with people around you to quit and try to persuade you to do the same. This happens a lot. Most people, when something doesn't work out, they're like, oh, well, I'm just trying to protect them so they don't get hurt. Don't wish more for the sake that you might fail. But then we're not going anywhere. Nobody would get anywhere. So just because one person failed doesn't mean you are. So you just got to keep going, and don't expect that these other people are going to still be with you, because this happens a lot in network marketing. Some people want the reward, but they don't understand what it actually takes to get there. So some people are going to fall off along the way. Some people, they're going to get to a certain point and they are just capped at that level, and they're not going to go any further because that's all they wanted. So some people aren't going to come with you, but you want to take as many as you can. Use yesterday's successes as fuel for persisting today. Don't get stuck on them. Instead, stay interested in the next success and the one after that. So we just hit a new level last month. I won't say which company because we're keeping this show generic, but we just hit a new level last month. And right on the very first of the next month, we were straight back to work, signing up again. You don't want to spend too much time you want you want to celebrate that moment because it is an achievement, but you don't want to sit in there for too long. Be like, yes, I achieved this, but you want to keep going, because also once you work really hard, you have to keep that volume going so that way you don't end up falling back. And this happens in business too. I had to blog. For our holistic health company, I did 3 blogs a day for 90 days to get our advertising up to where I wanted it. But then I still had to continue to release a blog every single day for the next year. And that was every day, 7 days a week. And I always had to do that. So you have to keep that up in order to keep the momentum going, because otherwise, if you have all this work right here and then you drop off and you have a gap that has nothing, that's when you're going to fall behind. What you need to do, you still need to keep activity so that way you don't lose that momentum. All right, where to go? There it is. Stay busy generating interest or income or learning something, doing things that help you keep going, because a rolling stone gathers no moss. And I think I already went over that. So never settle. Never be satisfied with your triumphs, and instead use them as fuel to move further towards your full potential. So stick and stay, it's bound to pay. So we've heard that a lot in the industry, stick and stay, but you want to stick and stay but do the work. Because you can't just stick and stay and do nothing, otherwise you're not going to go anywhere. But stick and stay and actually do the work, repeatedly learning how to do your presentation, getting in front of people. You're eventually going to get better until you find that one person, and then it just, like that. It almost has to get to the point where you absolutely do not care what the outcome's going to be when you sit down with people, and then all of a sudden everyone's like, you get that person that's like, you know what? I really like this. Yeah, I want to get started. And then you have that moment where you're like, oh, okay, oh shoot, what do I do now? And then we always get the call. They're like, okay, I need to sign this person up. And I'm like, okay, cool, we'll do it right here. We'll get it all done. It's all good. So, but that's where you have to get to. Persist until the miracle happens, which actually I just covered that. And Jeff, I'm going to let you take over at get it done and then get it right.
Okay, so I'm going to go into kind of what I got out of this, because everybody gets something different. It has become acceptable for people to quit and not see their goals through. So I was taught this early on by one of my mentors, David Bird. He says, winning is a habit. Unfortunately, so is losing. And losing has a lot to do with basically quitting and not finishing. I grew up when it was difficult, when it was hard. That's it. I'm done. I don't want to do it anymore. It's not fun anymore. It's not, it just doesn't interest me anymore. That cost me a lot. It says you don't need to be comforted when things don't turn out right. The fastest way, and this is true in a lot of things, the fastest way to get sympathy and the fastest way to attract people is quit. The fastest way to attract people is quit, right? Because when you quit or you don't make it, then people will come and feel sorry and get you ice cream and pat you on the back. And now there's a point where, yes, it's a learning process when you're a kid, but when you're an adult and you do these type of things, your reputation precedes you. And people don't realize that, you can be the best person in the world, but your reputation precedes you. You can have the best intentions in the world, but your reputation precedes you. If you are a quitter, people know that you quit things, and you start the next thing and quit that, and then start the next thing and then quit that. Like, people will eventually, it's going to be a lot harder to do everything you're doing. And I'm talking about what I did. So, you need to be comforted, turn off the lights. Okay. Comfort doesn't pay the bills. Quitting is basically failure. The super successful don't overcome their failures. They use them as fuel to persist. So this is something I learned from Think and Grow Rich, is, specifically talking about failure and not working through, is the majority of the people fail in life because they listen to their friends, family, and acquaintances. That's who they go to for advice. Probably some of the worst people to go to for advice, because what we want is somebody who will tell us something good, not somebody who will tell us something correct. So we go to our friends, hey, what do you think? Let me get a pat on the back, this person I love, and shake hands and get a drink, and and we're gonna have this great conversation, but they're not really telling you what you need, which is unfortunate, right? You need to go to people who are more successful than you are if you want correct advice. And when I say more successful than you are, in the field that you want to go into, right? Don't go to somebody that's completely opposite field and then say, hey, this is where I'm going. The difference between success and failure is staying in the game when others basically throw in the towel. You need the drive to follow through. Tips and rules. Every task. Complete every task. Finish everything you start. Brandy kind of went into that. When you hit the wall, don't focus on the obstacle. Look for creative ways to overrun it. So Tony Robbins says, if I'm resourceful, if there is a way, I will find it. If there is a way, I will find it. If it is to be, it's up to me is kind of another way to say it that I've heard the saying. But this is kind of the philosophy of the mentality that you have to have is, if I'm committed, there's always a way. If I'm committed, there's always a way. There's the resources, there's the people. I will figure it out. Expect others to quit. While persistence begins and ends with you, be prepared for people around you to quit and try to persuade you to do the exact same thing. So it's really dangerous to get around a group of people who are quitters, because you'll quit and not realize that's what you're doing. Why? Because they're influencing you to the next thing, to the next thing, the next thing. Anyway, stay busy, generating interest, income, learning something. Never settle, never be satisfied, go to the next thing. Stick and stay. Brandy talked about that. Persist until the miracle happens. Persist until most people quit right before the miracle takes place. If you refuse to quit, I don't care what you're trying to create, you're going to fail at it. It takes effort. And here's, when it feels uncomfortable, I got this, I can't remember from who, lean into it. When it feels uncomfortable, lean into it. Most people try to go around it or whatever, but when you lean into it, it makes it easier to move forward. But John Maxwell, one of his quotes is everything worthwhile is uphill. Everything worthwhile is uphill. So the moment it feels uncomfortable, it means you're growing. It means you're challenged. But the problem is if you look at personalities, 69% of people with the S-type personality, when it gets challenging, they want to stay at the status quo. They want to stay comfortable. The C-type personality weighs out their list, right? On the left is everything wrong with it. On the right is everything possibly right if I do this. Which list is bigger? Is it logical? Does it make sense to keep going? A lot of times I see the C-types, they'll be able to blast right through it. And again, project-based mentality, slow, methodical, engineer, accountant, add up the numbers. I see a lot of times C-type personalities succeed very easily in difficult situations because they track what they're doing and they know they're moving forward. The I-type personality is the most likely to quit and go off to the next thing. The most likely. What does that mean? That means if you're completely people-oriented and super active, the moment it gets hard, you're like, this isn't fun anymore, let's go find something else. Yep. And I've got a bunch of friends, and I've got that personality, so that's why I relate to that. D-type personality, it's one way or the other. I love it or I hate it. Get it done, then get it done right now. Perfectionism is nothing but a fancy word for basically not getting started, and that's your excuse. Oh, well, I have to do it. If I can't do it, I love this one. If I can't do it all out, then I'm not going to do it. I'm like, you don't do it all out on anything you do. That's just the excuse you keep using to stop yourself from doing anything. Sometimes it takes time to discover the best approach. Overnight success came from, and this is just Grant Cardon's numbers, and when I talk about tracking, his overnight success came from 150 social media posts, 78,000 tweets, 13,000 speaking engagements, 1,100 articles, 700 interviews, thousands of live streams, 3 million flight miles, and he doesn't know how many cold calls. If we tracked what you're doing in your business, these numbers would be hard to achieve for a company, let alone a person. Persist, and one day you will perfect, or at least in the eyes of others. One thing that people think is, well, I'm not gonna do the presentation until I get it down. You'll never get it down. It'll never be good enough. You're only gonna get good at it by doing it, and you'll have to do it badly before you do it well. That's just kind of the way it works. There's no excuse for not persisting. Persisting is the characteristic of legends. The greats, the geniuses who were called crazy because they didn't quit when the average person would have. I remember watching an interview with Steve Jobs, and he was talking about being an entrepreneur, and he's like, you have to be a little nuts to do this. He's like, because there's just times where you have to do things that everyone's telling you, don't go that way. And that's where the breakthroughs are. That's where the magic happens. Is just beyond that point where everybody leaves the room. It's like, you're nuts. And then it happens. And there's just so many stories out there. You know, one of the guys that I first met in direct sales flew out to California. I got picked up by one of the people who was kind of in our line of sponsorship. And we're driving down this road in Beverly Hills. And I'm like, man, this street looks familiar. He goes, oh yeah, Beverly Hills Cop was filmed 5 doors down. And I was like, well, that's why it looks familiar. I mean, the palm trees and the way the street looks. And his dad lived 5 doors down. And I was like, so how did you guys come, to this? He goes, well, my dad immigrated here with a couple of friends. The 3 of them went into a t-shirt business. After about 6-8 weeks, it was hard. So one of them quit. One of them lasted about a year, if I remember the story right. Another one lasted about a year, and then at that year, he's like, I can't do this anymore. My wife's pregnant. I've got this going on. I got to buy a house. I can't just keep the dream of these t-shirts. And I want to say it was something like 4 weeks, maybe 5 weeks later, after the guy sold out 100%, his dad hit a contract. I want to say it was with Nike, and it exploded. Millions of dollars. Can you imagine, thinking, well, I was 5 weeks away from $1 million contract, millionaire, overnight. He goes, so, we were able to buy this house. It was I want to say it was 12,000 square feet, but it was like the floor was marble. The walls were like granite or something. I mean, it was all stone, 2-story, beautiful, great layout, pool out back. Just amazing property. I mean, one of the properties, when you open the front door, you're like, what world am I in? I didn't grow up in a neighborhood, or I'd really never been in a house like that, honestly, up until that point, I don't think. I mean, my uncle's house is great, but it's a different kind of, my uncle has a ranch. This was kind of like a McMansion, would be the right way to put it. I don't think there was anything on that street under $5 million. So just to kind of give you perspective of value. And people are like, oh my God, what is the payment on $5 million? I'm like, if you can afford a $5 million house, the payment is irrelevant, right? I mean, you probably paid for the house. So I think it's funny how people justify, oh my God, I'd never be able to do that. I'm like, yeah, you're right. When you persist long after others quit, regardless of the outcome, your power, confidence, creativity, and genius automatically lights up. So being around good people helps you a lot. Being around people who win helps you a lot. How do you do that? Well, first of all, you can do that because people are like, I'm isolated, I don't know anybody. You can do that in 2 ways right away. Number one, you can start reading books. You can start reading books of people who are successful, who are succeeding. Rather than trying to fulfill this empty need inside of you to hang out with people so that way you feel better about yourself, you could actually read the books on all kinds of stuff. Maxwell's, I think, really, really good to kind of get perspective. Grant's harsh, and because he's a D-type personality, D-type personalities are not here to comfort you. They're here basically to, they're either kicking you forward or kicking you, to get up. But usually they're kind of abrasive. And certain people just don't relate to that at all. And it's not everyone's motivation factor. And I get that. But Maxwell does it very differently. His personality is more people-oriented, I would say. It's more, the high I and the S type personality, and the D comes in maybe as the third quality, maybe the second or third quality. But he's very, very people-oriented, gives perspective, shows you how to adapt. The next thing you can do is you can listen and watch. Listen to audios, watch audios, YouTube videos of successful people. You can spend an enormous amount of time around successful people and never actually have a physical person there. But that's what is going to help you more than anything. And then the third is physically meeting people who are moving in the direction you want to in the field you're in. If you're not in contact with one of the people who is succeeding on a great level inside of your company, the chances of you succeeding on a great level inside of your company is pretty slim. You have to get around the people moving to understand what movement you need to do to make this happen. So that's kind of what I have. So buenos dias, todo el mundo, everybody who's on here. Feliz y Cinco de Mayo, which probably they don't celebrate anywhere but here. But Taco Tuesday fell on actually Cinco de Mayo. Isn't that awesome? And then was canceled by a virus named after a Mexican beer. It's weird. Definitely weird. But if you can get some tacos and get out and do that, that's awesome. Happy Cinco de Mayo to everybody. And tomorrow we're going over chapter 13, which is the last chapter of this book. So appreciate everybody. Gracias and hasta mañana.